Elias can lead the Bengals to a victory tonight, they're in as a wild card. If they lose, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers watching tonight in Pittsburgh that will take the final wild card spot. Yesterday, the NFC Central Division picture was clarified down in Dallas. Green Bay's Don Majkowski hit Ed West to beat the Cowboys. And tonight, Majkowski and his teammates are in Green Bay with a vested interest in tonight's game. If the Minnesota Vikings lose, the Packers win the division. If the Vikings win, they're in the playoffs and Green Bay is out. Tonight, the Bengals must win to make the playoffs, and the Vikings must win to make the playoffs. Two teams, their playoff lives on the line tonight, as the Cincinnati Bengals meet the Minnesota Vikings on ABC's Monday Night Football.
Well, I'm sitting at home, it's the best seat in the land. Do you know how long I've been a Monday night fan? I remember all the big games, all the trick plays. It's been here for 20 years, and here it's gonna stay. I gotta get ready, make everything right, cause Monday night football's coming on tonight. Are you ready for the football and Monday night party? Hey, this is Rockin' Randall Hank, ready to get the good times started. You gotta hit 'em, gotta dock 'em, get the play called right, cause all my rowdy friends are here for Monday night. Everybody's a fan. Hey, this is the biggest party. Hey, Frank and Al and Dan, they really got it started. Week after week, it's the time that is right. All my rowdy friends are here on Monday night. Right.
From the Metrodome in Minneapolis on Christmas night, the final game of the 1989 regular season, the Cincinnati Bengals and the Minnesota Vikings. And tonight, for both teams, it's sudden death. A win tonight, and it's on to the playoffs. A loss, and it is all over. And let's take a look at the two scenarios that could take place tonight. If Cincinnati wins, Houston will be at Cincinnati in an AFC wild card game. Green Bay clinches the NFC Central Championship. Pittsburgh is out of the playoffs. Minnesota out of the playoffs. Now, if Minnesota should win tonight, Pittsburgh will be at Houston in the AFC wild card game, that game next Sunday. Minnesota clinches the NFC Central Championship. Cincinnati out of the playoffs. Green Bay out of the playoffs. And there it is. Hello again, everyone. I'm Frank Gifford. We're delighted you're with us. Merry Christmas, happy holiday, and again, what a pleasure to bring you this final game of the 1989 regular season. Cincinnati coming into tonight with an 8-7 record. They came within inches, of course, of winning it all, and a Joe Montana miracle took it away from them in the final seconds in Super Bowl 23. But they come in a very confident football team off a 61-7 victory over Houston, and a team, you get the sense that they plan on other games for this season. Meanwhile, the Minnesota Vikings, a trouble team. They are 9-6 on the year, and they have the #1 defense in the entire National Football League. But when they give up points, they give up those points at the wrong time. They have an offense that, when they acquired Herschel Walker, was said to be the final spoke in the wheel that would take them to the Super Bowl. And Al Michaels, if I could quote a former colleague of mine, that has not eventuated.
I think I remember that colleague. It hasn't eventuated. And one reason the Vikings have had problems offensively this year is that Walker has not become the dominant force they had hoped that he would. Anthony Carter has been bothered by injuries, but most importantly, they have gotten very, very inconsistent play from their quarterbacks, in particular Wade Wilson, who left last week's game against Cleveland with a knee injury in the fourth quarter. Tommy Kramer finished up. They lost in overtime. Wilson, though, is fine tonight and will start tonight's game, the most important of his career, as Minnesota tries to extend his season. But they do have two things going to the Vikings. As Frank mentioned, the #1 defense in the league, and this team has not lost a game at home this year. They are 7-0 in the Dome in 1989, and going back to last season, counting their playoff victory against the Rams, the Vikings have won their last 12 home games. Tonight, Dan, they face the Bengals, and there's no question if the Bengals play the way they did against Houston last week, they will be playing at Riverfront on Sunday. And nice tie, Santa. I like that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
The kids struck again at Christmas. I also have Santa Claus on my socks. You know, there's the rub, Al, and you used the word inconsistent when you talked about the Viking quarterback situation. Inconsistent has to describe this entire Bengal ball club. Twice this year, they've had games where they've scored in the 50s and in the 40s, followed it up the next week with games where they only scored 7 points. Sam Weiss has implored his ball club, guys, we can't have another offensive lapse. We've reached the playoffs now. That's what tonight's ball game is, a playoff game. One offensive lapse, we're out of it. If you like life in the pits, folks, it doesn't get any better than what you're going to see tonight. The Bengal offensive line against the Viking defensive line, in particular. Reimers and Munoz on the left side of the Bengal line against Millard and Dolman. Grade A stuff.